We read in Parshas Chukas about the Porah Aduma, the red heifer, that if one is contaminated with the contamination of the dead, that level of contamination cannot be removed from the person unless he undergoes the ritual of the Porah Aduma, the red heifer. Any other level of contamination, whether it's a contamination of the leper, although we say that a leper is the equivalent of coming in contact with the dead, nevertheless, if the leper, who's initially a leper, or a person comes in contact with a leper, goes to the mikvah, he's relieved from the contamination if he waits till nightfall. A person has a flow, a woman is a menstruant, a person has a seminal nocturnal discharge, whatever it may be, person comes in contact with the carcass of an animal, a rodent, although the person is contaminated, person goes to the mikvah, nightfall comes, person's relieved of that contamination. But the tumas mes, the contamination of the dead, you must undergo the ritual of the Porah Aduma, the red heifer, which the Torah discusses, and the Torah refers to it, Zos Chukas HaTorah. This is the statute of the Torah, Asher Tziva Hashem Leimor, which God had commanded us, saying, Daber el Bnei Yisrael, you should speak to the Bnei Yisrael, V'yikchu eilecha Porah Aduma, they should take for you. So Rashi cites Chazal, the Midrash, it must be purchased with the proceeds of the people themselves. Porah Aduma Tmima, a heifer which is fully, totally red, Asher Ein Bo Mum, which is not blemished, Asher Lo Ole, which a burden was not put on the animal, was not worked with, didn't pull a wagon, nothing was put on it, which is the equivalent of a yoke. So Rashi cites Chazal, the Midrash. What does it mean? Zos Chukas HaTorah. This is the statute of the Torah. Fisha Soton v'umas ha'olam monin is Yisrael. Satan and the nations of the world, they deride, they aggrieve the Jewish people. Loma ma mitzvah zos. What's this mitzvah all about? Ma tam yesh bo. What is the rationale of this mitzvah? Meaning we're confounded with the mitzvah. Not being able to respond sometimes makes us feel foolish. Many years ago I still have the same students. They went to the best universities. And because of my level of credibility through my teachings, although they didn't know the source material on the positions of Judaism, when somebody would ask him, why do you conduct yourself this way? He said, we really don't know. It's because the rabbi taught us this. So they said they felt foolish because they weren't able really to defend the position because they themselves didn't understand, didn't know the sources. It was based on my credibility in terms of me being their teacher. So what I used to tell them then, if anybody asks you the question and they really want to know the answer, give them my phone number. I will tell them the rationale, the source material, so you don't have to feel foolish. Sudden, the Umas Olam, nations world, they come, they say, this is foolish. It's absurd. And there's tremendous derision. Leficha Kosef Chuka, God says, it's my statute. Gzerihim lefanai. It's my decree. It's my decree, and you have no right even to reflect on it, to question it. It's like a person has a 100 IQ. and a person graduated MIT with a PhD in astrophysics, and the person with the 100 IQ says to the person with the PhD, who's one of the leading people in the field of astrophysics, could you explain it to me? Explains it to him. He says, it doesn't make sense. She says, why? Because I don't understand. That's why it doesn't make sense. He says, maybe you don't understand this because you're limited, because you don't have the capacity to understand. He says, you realize I have credentials and I have an IQ which surpasses yours, and you're overshadowed endless times. So because of your limitation, you're telling me that's the basis why it doesn't make sense? Well, you don't have the capacity even to process this. God says, I issued the decree. I am the legislator. My knowledge surpasses all existence. My knowledge is divine. So Satan comes and says, you should understand it. Something finite, how does it understand something which is within the context of infinite? The infinite mind issued this. It's beyond, and God says, it's my statute. This is not legislated by man. This is not promulgated by man. This is divine. Therefore, whatever you may consider being the understanding is not the understanding, because it's out of the realm of human experience, human reference, and there's no framework that you could attribute it to. That's the answer. And because it's coming from a source which is credible, which is God himself, I don't feel minimized. The Rambam writes about, we all know that the appellation of Yudke Vovke connotes Hoya Hova V'yeh. God was, God is, and God is in the future. What is the meaning of that? Does it mean God was in the future and he's no longer in the past, and he's no longer in the past? God is in the future, he knows the future, but the future hasn't yet come. But if regarding God, the future hasn't come, and the past no longer exists, that means God is finite. God spans all, is infinite. Infinite means he's not within the context of anything. But how do we relate to that? But if the past no longer exists, how could God be in the past if the past is no longer? How could God be in the future if we're not yet in the future? Rambam says it's beyond the human mind. The human being finite, being limited, you cannot fathom or comprehend something which is out of the realm of your own existence. Therefore, it's an impossibility. You cannot understand it. And there's certain things which, unless God explains it and gives you the capacity, you don't have the capacity. That's firstly. So, Zos Chukas Torah, Gzeirhi Milfana. It's my decree. You have no right even to question it. Because a question, when you question something, it needs an answer. There is no question. I'll give you an example. I always say to people, years ago, there was a question. People asked the question. Today, it's much less of a question. What was the question? Why was there a Holocaust? 6 million Jews, million children murdered by these demonic monsters. Why? So I would say, if you have a question, there is no answer. There's no answer. You can't even speculate why. Because the dimension of the tragedy is beyond our grasp. But if you have emun and bitochon, if you have faith and trust in God, the question is not a question. It's not a question. God says, it's my decree. Once you accept that, and God is sur tomim polok, God is just and perfect, and there's no iniquity in his justice, I have no problem. I don't need an answer. Because I believe it's due to God's decision, there's no question. But I have to know. If you have to know, that means there's a lack of trust. The question's a question. That question has no answer. So if it's a question, there's no answer. God says, you know what the answer is? That is the answer. It's not for you to understand. Once that's said, there's nothing more to discuss. There are many questions. A man, there's such a thing as a male soul and a female soul. A man has an obligation in the study of Torah. A woman's not obligated to study Torah. A woman only has to study the laws which pertain to herself to be able to execute and to live properly within the context of a woman. So what is the basis for her studying? Only to know how to live as a Jew, as a Jewess. A male, the study of Torah goes beyond knowing how to serve God meticulously within the context of mitzvahs. It goes beyond that. But why? Why does the man have to study and the woman doesn't have to study? Mitzvah saseish man grama. A time-determined mitzvah a woman doesn't have under normal circumstances and obligation, a man does. Why? So it's known, Chavetz Chaim always cites Reb Chaim Vital, that just as you have Ramach Mitzvah Saseh, you have 248 positive commandments, there are 248 components to the soul. And there's a corresponding factor that each mitzvah nourishes spiritually that part of the neshama. Because that's the makeup of the Jewish soul. So therefore a man, a male soul has a different number of components. A woman has a different neshama. There's a male soul, there's a female soul. It's famous Or Chaim HaKodesh who writes that if a man is born with a female soul, he can never father a child. And if a woman is infused with a male soul, she can never conceive. Why does God do it? Nobody knows why he does that sometimes. But factually, but why do I have a male soul? Why is there a male soul? Why is there a female soul? Because God decided in terms of creation, there's a man and a woman, and whatever the understanding of objective of creation is, that's what's needed for creation. But why? But why am I the male and the woman is the male? The woman says, I prefer to be the man, and the man says, I prefer to be what? It's irrelevant what you prefer. God chose you to be what you're meant to be, because that was his decision. But I have to know. You don't have to know. God's understanding is absolute. Based on that, he made that decision. But why? There's no question why. Because this decision is absolute, truthful, absolutely correct. And that's what it is. And that's the answer. The moment you question, there's no answer. And many things have no answer. Why does the heart have 4 chambers? Why? But we can live with that question because it's irrelevant. Identically, everything's irrelevant. Because if you believe in God and his justice and his understanding is absolute, there's no question. You accept it. The only question we're supposed to question. Ein abaishin lomed. Chazal tell us when you study Torah and you have to understand something and you don't understand it and you're supposed to understand it, you're supposed to ask the question. Because that question has an answer. But the question which has no answer, that question is not asked. A chok means it's a statute. Within the context of rational thinking, there is no answer unless God gives you the answer. So if he doesn't give you the answer, what's the answer? It's my statute. Gzeirahim lefonai. That's the answer. But maybe you'd say, God is somehow hiding something from me. Right? Maybe there is an answer. Maybe it is within my capacity. So how do we go and reiterate it and prove that it's not? So the Midrash cites a pasuk, a verse in Koheles. Shlomo tells us, Kozo nisisi bechochma. All this I've tested with my wisdom. Omarti echkama. I said I'd become wiser. I'd become wizened. And I applied myself. We were chokim many. But it's far, it's distant from me. It's beyond my grasp. Now, what did Shlomo Melech say? So the Midrash goes to explain, Omarti ech komo. Ksiv vayitin elokim chochm l'Shlomo. God gave wisdom to Shlomo. Usvuna harbe mod v'rochav leiv. Great levels of understanding and a broadness of heart. Rabbi Yochanan, phenomenal midrash. B'shem Reb Shimon Yotzodok. Rabbi Yochanan says name Shimon Yotzodok. What is Shlomo Melech analogous to? Moshe Melech. It's analogous to a king. Shoyelo Oev. He had a beloved subject. V'ya Melech Ovo Yosemidai. And the king had tremendous love for this subject. Omar Melech Shal Mimeni Kol Mashe Tirtza Leinosen Loch. You can ask me anything you want, and I will give you what you ask me. And the subject was very wise. Omar, if I ask him that he should appoint me to be a duke, he'll do it for me. He'll address my wishes. If I ask him to be a higher status of courtier, he would do that. You know what I'm going to ask? I will ask him for something that everything pales to this request. So what did he say? He says, you gave me permission to ask anything I want. I want your daughter as a wife. That's what I ask. Once I'm your son-in-law, there's nothing that's going to be withheld from me. He says, the king says, I swear on your life, that's exactly what I wanted you to ask. For my daughter's hand, my daughter will be part of your household. Once you have my daughter, you have everything. So Hashem says to Shlomo, just ask what you want and I'll give it to you. Shlomo says, Shlomo's wise. Even based before he was endowed with unlimited wisdom. Ma'eshal, im eshal kesav zov, who shol biyodi, he will give me gold and silver. Im eshal malchus, if I ask him for royalty, kingship, who shol biyodo, he will give it to me. La reini shol dovish kol advarim tfeinu, I will ask him for something that everything pales for it. Mi'ar omal of the HaKadosh Baruch Hu Rebbeinu Shel Olam, eini mevakish mich elo chochma. All I want is wisdom. Nothing more than that. I swear, Yofeh Sha'alto. It's appropriately you asked, Sha'alto Chochma. You asked for wisdom. Because once you have Chochma, everything is secondary and pales to wisdom. Hakes vazov tfeilim no. Tov piri michoretz pos. Everything pales. Therefore you have everything. Now listen. What degree of chokhmah did God give Shlomo? This is something unfathomable. V'yitein elokim chokhmah l'Shlomo, shenoselo ha-chokhmah b'matona. He gave him, it was a gift. Chokhmah, wisdom was gifted to him. The pasuk says, kachol asher asvas hayom, like the sand on the shore, on the seashore. What does that mean? He gave him wisdom like the seashore. Now, Klal Yisrael, Hashem says to Avram Avinu, your children will be like the sand on the beaches, on the seashore. His wisdom was the equivalent of all the Jews combined. Because we were compared to the sand on the beaches. The Chachamim, they have discretion. Hazkenim yeshlem das. The elders, the sages have das. Hayilod yeshlem das. Each one has a different type of understanding, different segments of people. Listen to this. V'myamdu kol yishel l'tzad echod. If you put all the Jews combined on one side of the scale, u'shlom l'tzad echod, and you put Shlomo on the other side, chachmos gedol mishlem. His wisdom outweighs this. It's unfathomable. All the Jews, encapsulate all their wisdom. Shlomo outpaces them, makes it all pale. Now, Shlomo says, "Achakmo rechokim mimeni." He says, "I've been wizened more than all the Jews combined. It's beyond me." So if Shlomo says it's beyond him, you're going to tell me it doesn't make any sense? First Hashem says, "Gzeri b'lefonai." You're not permitted even to question it. But we have something to reiterate it. Shlomo reiterates it. So if Shlomo says it's beyond him, you tell me God is keeping the secret here. God gave you something which is nonsensical. But rather, what do you attribute it to? If Shlomo didn't have the capacity to process it, you're going to be able to even have any infinitesimal understanding of what it is? Nothing. There's a famous story. Rabbi Yonasan Eibshitz was known to be he had a mind like a computer. Lived in the latter part of the 17th century, 1700s. And besides knowing the Torah in its entirety, besides being a great Kabbalist, he spoke 40 languages. He knew history, he knew music, he knew astronomy, he knew mathematics, he knew everything. And he says, Shlomo says in Koheles, Havel havolam hakol hovel. Everything in existence is vain. It has no innate value. See, a person says, the man doesn't have two nickels to rub together. He says, all wealth means nothing. All music means nothing. All artistry means nothing. So the person says, you speak like a fool. You don't even know what it's all about. You're passing judgment. Of course you say it means nothing. You don't even know what it is. But Shlomo Melech had everything. If Shlomo Melech had everything, what did he say? I'm telling you, I have wealth, I have orchards. There's nothing I haven't done in my life. There's nothing I don't understand in existence. I'm telling you, it's all nothing. It's all vain. It's all vanity. So Rabbi Yonasan Eibshitz says, nobody was his equal in his generation. He says, there's nothing I don't understand. There's nobody as adept in any field, mathematics, astronomy, philosophy, language, literature, everything. I'm telling you, it's a bunch of nonsense. It has no value. The only thing that has value is if it's used as a means, not an end. As an end, it's vain. Nothing. So Shlomo Melech says, Rechokim mimeni. Achakmi rechokim mimeni. As wise as I became. I was down with a wisdom endowed, all Klausen combined is not me. And I'm telling you, it's impossible to understand. So whatever the Sultan says, whatever the Umas Olam say, whatever nations say, they deride you, there's derision, there's deprecation. Falls on deaf ears. There's this famous story with Rabbi Yonasan Eibshitz when he was a little boy. And it was known the church was always looking for child prodigies to enlist them in the church. And when he was 5 years old, he already knew Tanakh, he knew Mishnayos by heart, he knew many Masechtas, tractates by heart, when he was a 5-year-old little boy. So, and the bishop heard about this little Jewish child. He figures, and his father was the Rav in the town. So the bishop sends a message to his father, I would like to spend a few hours with your son. Could you drop him off at my palace? So he comes into the palace, this little boy with payas, shaven head, and the bishop sits him down by the table, and his father wasn't worried. He figured his son is smart enough to deal with this old bishop. He says, I hear you're very brilliant. You're one of a kind of a genius. Is it true? He says, yes, it's true. He says, is it true that you know the Bible, the 24 prophets and scripture? Is it true? Everything by heart? Yes. With the commentators? Yes. Is it true you even know the Talmud, the Mishnah? He says, it's true. He says, I want to ask, do you believe everything that's written in the Bible is true? He says, yes. Would you give your life for it? Yes, no question. He says, he gives him chapter, verse. He says, it says in Exodus, chapter and verse, that you must follow majority rule. Are the majority of Jews, people in the world, are they Jews or Christians? They're definitely not Jews. They don't adhere to the belief of monotheism. If that's the case, if you say you believe everything in your Torah is true, you must convert to Christianity. This is what this bishop says to this little 5-year-old child. So he looks at him, he's not fazed. He says, I want to explain it to you. The Torah says, if you're confronted with an irresolvable question and you don't know what direction to take, you follow majority rule. I have no question. There's only one God, there's only one religion, everything else is nonsense. It has no relevance to me. He wasn't fazed. If you have that understanding and that confidence that what you believe is true, it's irrelevant what the world says. Irrelevant. Now, we find something interesting. Avraham Avinu, we all get worn down. Could one person take on the world single-handedly? You get worn down. People tell you you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. You're a fanatic, you're an extremist, you're a zealot, and they'll put every label on you to minimize you and to deprecate you. If the person says, something, maybe they're right. Maybe I am too extreme. And the person that resulted that, because he wants to be somehow acknowledged or embraced or accepted, what does he do? He starts compromising. And a subliminal erosion begins within his mind, within his emotion. What was the strength of Avraham Avinu? Avraham was called Ivri. Ivri meant Hum Ever Echod, V'chol Olam Ever Hasheni. He was on one side, he took on the world single-handedly. And he slugged it out with them. The 4 mightiest kings he destroyed. Without any question. Never wavered, ever. But why was he able to do that? Firstly, he had to show his dedication to God. How did it start? He went into the kiln. Once he went into that kiln, then there was an open relationship. God says, I'm with you. If God talks, whispers in your ear, and you know he's with you, the world is meaningless. Numbers are meaningless. Everything is meaningless. That's why he was the Ivri. See, they didn't understand who Avram was. It's like a person has most sophisticated weaponry, and the enemy, billions, they're using bows and arrows. And you have a laser gun that could vaporize them in one moment. So what, you're worried about billions of people? You just pulled the trigger, they're all gone. That was Avraham Avinu. His level of clarity, his level of confidence, his level of assurance, he had Hashem on his side. Once you know God's on your side, even if you have to die, it's irrelevant. He went into the Kibshon Eish. He went into the kiln and came out alive. There's nothing to worry about. It's interesting. We find, the Medrash tells us that Hashem says to Avram, I want you to circumcise yourself. And after you circumcise yourself, you'll have a child, the land of Canaan will be yours. So it says, he had 3 compatriots, Oner, Eshkol, and Mamre. So he consults with Oner. He says, should I circumcise myself? He says, I don't think it's a good idea. Why? Because he says, you just destroyed the 4 mightiest kings. If you circumcise yourself, you're going to become infirm. If you become infirm, the families, they're going to come and they're going to kill you because you're not going to be able to defend yourself. So Avram says to Oner, I hear what you're saying. Thank you for the advice. He goes to Eshkol. He says, do you think I should circumcise myself? He says, I don't think it's a good idea. A man of your age, 99 years old, God forbid, you could bleed to death. At your age to circumcise yourself, I don't think it's a good idea. So Avram says, I hear what you're saying. Thank you for your advice. He goes to Mamre, and he says to Mamre, should I? He says, I don't understand the question. God just gave you the ability to defeat the 4 mightiest kings in the world. You're worried about circumcision? God's on your side. What are you worried about? He says, you're my man. So the Mefarshim, the commentators, there was never chas v'sholom a question. He just wanted to know where each of these people stood. And who said what was exactly on mark correct. And that's why it's Elonei Mamre. Where did Hashem appear to Avram? In the plains of Mamre. That was the reward. Since Mamre was at the position, he understood it. If Hashem saved you from 4 kings, he took you out of the kiln, you're going to worry about their families. You're going to worry about bleeding to death when God tells you to circumcise yourself. There's nothing to worry about. It's interesting. You find the famous argument between Reb Shimon Yochai and Rabbi Shmuel. How should you live your life as a Jew? So Rabbi Shmuel says, based on Psukim, it says, you should gather in your harvest, your grain, your oil, your wine. So what do? Of course, you study Torah continuously. When it comes time to till the field, to sow, to reap, to thresh, to winnow, you do it. Why? That's the prescription of life. That's why God created the world. Reb Shimon Yochai says, but if a person invests his life in that besides Torah, you're going to plow in the plowing season, sow in the sowing season, reap in the reaping season. Torah matei oleh. There's not going to be any time left for Torah. Therefore, he says, no. You're supposed to only study, and God will provide whatever you need. This is very important. Will provide whatever you need. He says, so how do you understand what it says in the Shema? It says, if you listen to my mitzvos, the rains will come. He says, that's a Jew who fully is not committed to God. If you're not committed to God, you got to do your own bidding. You're committed to God, others will do your bidding. But you have to be fully committed to Torah. Of course, the argument is how to interpret the pasuk. How to interpret it. But if a person, you could interpret from today forever. Where was Rosh Yochai in his belief? The argument has nothing to do with what Rabbi Shmuel believed and what Rabbi Shimon Yochai believed in terms of their emun and bitachon. The argument didn't stem from the emun, chas v'sholom. Rabbi Shmuel's emun and bitachon, his faith and belief was no less than Rabbi Shimon Yochai. They were arguing what the Mesorahs how to interpret the psukim. But a person himself, if he didn't have sufficient emunah b'tochon, and you listen to Rabbi Shimon Yochai, he says, I hear what you're saying, but who's going to put bread on my table? How am I going to make ends meet? I think Rabbi Shmuel, his position is a more cogent position. It's more realistic. You understand? Hashem says, you're supposed to do it, you're committed to study, I will provide. No holdbacks. You say, but what about how am I going to make ends meet? I don't understand. Many years ago, there was a certain person, lived in New York today, he lives in Israel, and originally was a Canadian, and he went to see the Tosha Rebbe, Zeich Tzaddik Lefrocha. So Tosh is a suburb of Montreal, and Tosha Rebbe was a very holy man. He was known as the Wonder Rabbi. And the community there, they're all malamnim teachers, people sitting and studying, and shochtim. Out of that, there's no industry, there's no commerce in the community. So he comes to the rabbi, this person's a businessman, he was a young man, maybe 30, came from a very wealthy family. He says to the Tosha Rebbe, so, by the way, how do you people support yourselves? This is the question he asked the Tosha Rebbe. He says, we have schools, we study, we this, that. He says, yeah, but how do you support yourselves? And he asked the question about 16 times. And afterwards he says, I told you. We do what we're supposed to do, and things work out. He says, yeah, but how do you support yourselves? He didn't understand the question. And he was the type of person, the Tosha Rebbe, in terms of his level of holiness, he didn't understand exactly where he was coming from because of where he was at. Reb Chaim Volozhin makes a point in the Gemara. It says, "Harbe osuk Reb Shimon will also be Adam. Many people follow Rav Shimon ben Yochai and they didn't succeed. So what does that mean? Does that mean say Rav Shimon ben Yochai's approach is the wrong approach? He said many did not. But what's the inference? But a minority did. So how did the minority succeed? The answer is because they had the emunah bitochon. That's why they succeeded. They had the faith in the belief. Therefore they could succeed. But you have to have that level of internal belief and confidence to be able to carry through. The moment you start vacillating, you want to have the cake and eat it, as they say. It doesn't happen. There's the famous Medshtan Chuma. We find the first parsha of the Shema. It says you should love God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your possessions. It says Modecho. In the second parsha, second portion, it doesn't mention Modchem. What about the money? What about putting the money where your mouth is, as they say? The first, he says, people are willing to forego the amenities and the pleasures of life for the sake of Torah. That's a true demonstration of Avas Hashem. Therefore, that person, God will provide without a question. The second, we're willing to die for you, God. We'll give you our hearts, but you know something? The compromise on our needs, not so quick. We need a little bit for ourselves. We can't give it all to you. You know something? If that's the case, you're doing your own bidding. You're doing your own bidding. But again, we're not saying that Chas v'shalom, the bad Jews, they're good Jews, they're tzaddikim. But the ultimate level that you should merit, what Rav Shimon ben Yochai is saying, you have to have that level of commitment. We read in Pirkei Avos, a person who's lomei Torah mitoch oni. You study Torah despite that you're impoverished. Ultimately, you're going to study it mitoch osher. The person who wastes his time mitoch osher, God gave you everything under the sun. You have no reason not to study, and just whittle away your time. So God says, I'm wasting my time with this guy, with this person. Sofa levatla mitoch oni. God says, if you're wasting my time, you might as well waste your time not on my time. You might as well waste your own time, not my time. But a person who's willing to sacrifice when he has nothing, so what has that demonstrated? Demonstrates a tremendous dedication to God. It's Kiddush Hashem. He's a faithful servant. Hashem says, of course I'm going to help you out. I'm going to make it easy for you. And I'll provide for you. Therefore, Sofa Lomdo, Mitoch Osher, God will provide. We speak about the laws of contamination. And within and all the details, how do you create the ash? How is it made? The ash of the paraduma? How it contaminates, who it purifies, and it concludes. Zos HaTorah Odom Ki Yomas Ba'oel. This is the Torah. A man who dies within a tent, Kol Haboel Ha'oel, one who enters into that covered location, that tent, Chal Shebol Yitbo Shivas Yomim, will be contaminated for 7 days. The Gemara tells us, what is Zos HaTorah? If you want to acquire Torah, in a Torah Niknas Elamisha Memes Atzmo Leo, Torah can only be acquired a person who's willing to die for it. You're willing to forego all the amenities of life. What is that? We read in the 6th chapter of Pirkei Avos. Pasbel Tochal, by Mesurat Tishteh, Al Oretz Tishon Chai Tzar Tichya. Doesn't mean say you should eat bread with salt, water in small measures, even if you have to sleep on the ground, even if you have to live a life of deprivation. That's Darko Shel Torah. That's Odom Ki Yomas Ba'oel. You're willing to forego all the amenities of life for the sake of Torah. If you're willing to do that, then you become a receptacle. You merit all what we call the Siyata D'Shmaya for Torah. Zos HaTorah Odom Ki Yomas Ba'oel. This is the Torah, a person who's willing to die. Now, let's talk. It's interesting. We're talking about the laws of person actually dying, the laws of contamination. not only contaminated, that if you come in contact with the corpse, even if the corpse is under the same roof and you're in that room or under the same covering, you become contaminated. I mean, is it a play on words? What exactly is the Torah saying? We're talking about the contamination of the dead, when you need the ritual of the Paraduma. How is it somehow connected? Or Chaim HaKadosh, without getting into the details, he explains, we're talking about the laws which pertain to contamination and how you reinstate the person to be spiritually pure. Paraduma. So he asks, it says, Zos Chukas HaTorah. It should say Zos HaChukah. This is the statute. It should say Zos Chukas HaTuma. This is the statute of contamination. Zos Chukas HaTaro. Say, this is the statute of purification. What does it say, Zos Chukas HaTorah? It's the Chukah which is somehow connected to Torah. So he explains. He says something very interesting. When we were in Egypt, we brought a Korban Pesach. The Korban Pesach was consecrated. You're not permitted to eat kochim, consecrated meat, in a contaminated state. Weren't the Jews contaminated? They came in contact with the dead. This is pre-paraduma, before the red heifer. How were they permitted? How were they permitted to engage in something that was consecrated, which was a korban, in a contaminated state? He explains, what exactly was our classification at that time? We b'nei Noach. If a non-Jew comes in contact with the dead, is he contaminated? If he has a nocturnal discharge, is he contaminated? If a woman menstruates, is she contaminated? No. All the laws of contamination only has relevance to a Jew, not to a non-Jew. Pre-Sinai, we were b'nei Noach. Our classification were Noahites. We were not susceptible to contamination because we're like the Gentiles, no different. What happened at Sinai? Something happened at Sinai. Until Sinai, we find Atem kriyim hodom v'hem lo kriyim hodom. Now, Adam, before the sin, he was classified as Odom. That means he had a potential to bring every aspect of existence to a level of perfection, including himself. Always mention, name it a Malbim. Why is the human being called Odom? Odom comes to the word Adoma. What does earth represent? Potential. You leave the ground, the most fertile earth, fallow, all it is earth. You go and you cultivate it, and you plant it, the potential of life is endless. That's exactly what a Jew is. Atem kriyim Odom. You are the Odom. Meaning that if you invest your life, as God says it should be invested in Torah mitzvahs, you create infinite return, eternity. But if you waste your life, not only are you sinning, it's just a waste. You're like a clump of earth. You're going nowhere, and you accomplish nothing. So when did we become Odom? When did we achieve that capacity that we generate the ultimate? Eternity, infinite returns, results that happened at Sinai. When God took us as his Goy Kodosh, Mamlechas Kohanim, when we said Nasiv and Nishma, we agreed to accept the Torah, we became Odom. Once we became Odom, the dimension of Kedusha, the capacity, is unfathomable. As I always mention, Rav Chaim Voloshin cites it, that the greatest angel cannot fathom the spiritual makeup of Nishmas Yisrael, the neshama of a Jew. The neshama of a Jew is not the same as the soul of a non-Jew. It's a different dimension soul. The greatest angel cannot fathom its dimension of holiness. But when did that somehow blossom? That happened when we accepted Torah at Sinai. Like a metamorphosis came upon us, and we became a different reality. Now that we have that capacity, now we become susceptible to contamination. He explains that because a Jew himself, what is the basis for contamination? They're nether forces. It's impure forces out there. And because everything in existence wants to be associated with Kedusha, which is something which is God-given, that's its nourishment. So they attach themselves to the Jew, because the Jew has that Kedusha, even when he's alive. Therefore, if he comes in contact with the dead, he's contaminated. With a rodent, with the carcass of an animal, he's contaminated. But the non-Jew has no Kedusha, because there's no source, there's nothing that generates. Therefore, even the nether forces have no interest, because there's no Yenika, there's no nourishment, there's no attachment, there's nothing to attach itself to. Therefore, there's no contamination. But the Jew became the Odom, so Zos Chukas HaTorah. From where does the statute of contamination emanate from? HaTorah. At Sinai, that we received the Torah, then the metamorphosis took place. We became that new dimension person. Therefore, now we have relevance to contamination and to purification, to reinstatement. That's the Orach Chaim HaKodesh. Now, Zosa Torah Odom Ki Yomas Ba'oel. It's not a play on words. What is the capacity of a Jew? Although, in the physical sense, we're finite, but in terms of our context of reality, we are eternal. We've always been the smallest people. In the material, everything is quantitative. We're outnumbered billions to what? How many Jews do you have? A handful of Jews, relatively speaking. But yet, everything revolves around the Jew. Current events is the Jew. Anti-Semitism is the Jew. The Jew, as much as they try, chas v'sholem, to snuff us out, we're still here. And then Ola and Geher, they've gone to the dustbins of history. They're gone. Does it make sense? The answer is, of course, our physicality is only our context of function. But that's not our essence. Our essence is not our physicality. It's our spirituality. So if that is a spirituality, why are we subject to contamination? Because our physicality is not our context. That's not the reality of who we are. Therefore, Zosa Torah, Odom Ki Yomas Ba'oel. Eina Torah Nixon Mishamei Misatz Moleo. So if the Jew is not his physicality, and you go and you address only physicality, then you have no relevance to who you really are. You only have relevance to who you are when you compromise your physicality and you dedicate and you invest yourself in Torah. That's when you have relevance to Torah. Because you're not that finite person. So if you're not finite, why are you addressing your physicality? Rav Shach, but the Chavetz Chaim said something before. It says in Pirkei Avos that this world is like a prosdor, Litraklin. This world is like a corridor to a great banquet hall. Okay? It's only a pass-through. So when you want to decorate and beautify, where do you invest it? In the pass-through? You know, when you go on a plane, you go through the walkway. Doorway. Right? What is it? There's a smell. You feel it's cold or hot. You have some pictures on the wall. You go into the airplane. Does that corridor compare to first class on the airplane or business class? Doesn't. So they said, why not? It should be ornate, elaborate, like you're walking through the hallways of a palace. The answer is that's not the palace. That's the drawbridge to cross to get into the palace. That's all it is. It's only a means to an end to get there. The world is only a prosdor. It's only a pass-through. So where do you invest? In the pass-through or in the ultimate? What's eternal, the body or the soul? The Torah can only be acquired only if you see what the primary is and what the secondary is. So where do you invest it? You invest it in the packaging, you invest it in the quality of the product. Right. Of course, you need the packaging so people should be attracted to the product. But if you open it and you see the product, it's a shoddy product, nobody's buying the product any longer. You're trying to buy the product. The product, the essence is the neshama, not the body. In a Torah, niknis el mishamei v'satz moleo. Torah, which is the ultimate, that's the objective, because only through Torah can you perfect yourself. And only because of Torah do you have an infinite soul. Therefore, you have to forego the physicality to succeed with the spirituality.